one over here. We just kind of sit over there and do our thing, but he has picked up, he's done very, very well. And we had some data issues, and we've had computer issues, and you know, I'll never hear about it because we just keep going house and just keep going. And so, like I said, I think we're going to get back on task, get back on point. But Megatron over here, the stuff now has been dialed in and doing the do. So I just wanted to bring attention to that. I don't know what that is.
You can't clap for appointments in this place.
Shut up. Really? Wow.
I'm
We
just
get
kidding.
all darn crew in this meeting. So I love science, and I love things that, that show through the wormhole, and maybe you've seen that on TV, and Del and I are talking about History Channel stuff. I just love all that stuff. And every once in a while, I come across something that I find fascinating. And so my start out questions for the day is, if you know, throw it out there, but if you don't, what is it that science has determined, or what are the only things that science has determined that works almost at the speed of light? Very, very near.
Works almost.
Think about that. Think about that. A little while ago, and we'll call it a long time ago, or we'll call it back in the old days, is there was a man who had an idea. He had something that he wanted to get across. And I don't know what it was, what his message was, or what his thought process was, but he stood in a square, and it was an area in a town where there was people going by. And he stood there, and he tried to vocalize and get his point across. And I don't know what language he spoke or what region of the world that he was in, but he stood there in a square with an idea that he felt somewhat determined about. His idea was something that he was either passionate about or that he believed about, and it might have been something that he had discovered or realized. And he stood in that square a long time ago, and he talked in whatever language it was, but he spoke to the passersby. And as you might imagine, if you were in a marketplace or walking down the street and someone was trying to talk to you about something, you may not have paid him any never mind because it's a stranger on the street. You might have. And in regards to that, he got a hold of some people, he got through to some people, but most people on the street where this guy was trying to get his point across, beloved as it was to himself, he had a hard time with that. And again, people have busy days. They're doing what they do, and they may not have wanted to hear, or maybe they didn't understand, or maybe they were disinterested in his message. And so he's a tenacious individual. He keeps doing this. He keeps on throughout the day, trying to get his message across. And he had gone so far, he had gotten himself, I guess what you might want to call the soapbox or the rock or whatever it was, and he had elevated himself to some degree above the other people. And this added a little bit of speculation, or if you will, because now you have not only is there a guy standing on a street corner trying to talk to you as you're walking by, but he has put himself on a soapbox or a mini stage to get attention. A little bit disheartened, this fellow goes home. And on the way home, he passed an interesting place. And this interesting place that he passed, he looked into the shop or to the window, or in my head it could have been many different things, but he saw something. And he saw, and he realized that what was going on in this place over here might mesh with what he was trying to do. And so I don't know if it was days later or weeks later or months later, but sometime later, this man found himself in the middle of the square. Now, when he was there the first time, in his mind, he had something to say. He had what you might call a joyous noise to make. Okay? And he was in that square, and he was doing his thing, but we came back the next time, he had it put together. And he had himself a soapbox, and he had passed on the way home either people playing or a store, an instrument store. And he brought with him on this soapbox some instrument. And I don't know, maybe it was a violin, maybe it was an orchestra, maybe it was just a drum. It was a long time ago, I don't know. But he got on his soapbox this time, and he played his instrument. And he rhythmically put together his message. And he made a little bit more of a joyous noise, and now people that were walking by and people that he was trying to get the attention of, they heard him. Now some people stopped because they heard the noise, and they had no interest in the message, and there was a rhythm to it, and there was some music to it, and whether they identified with it or not, but they stood around. Some people, they heard, but they kept going, they weren't interested. Others engaged. They were like, not only do I hear a man on a drum or an instrument, but I hear a joyous noise, but I hear a little bit of a message. Some of them totally engaged. They talked to him after he got done, and he realized, I put a message together with a joyous noise and a little bit of entertainment, if you will, And I got people's attention. Now, I don't know how long ago this was, and I don't know what his message was, and I don't know the people that he was talking to. But I do know that that man who put those two things together was the birth of advertising. He figured it out. He was like, I got something to say. You want to know, I'm going to get through to you, put it together. It might have just been a drum. People are going to stand around because I'm watching this drum. In my head, this happened before billboards and probably before writing and long before radio. But it makes sense, okay? Back to that thing that operates at the speed of light. To change gears. Do you know what that is? It is. It is absolutely the brain. The brain operates at just ridiculously fast. Actually, I looked this up. 20 million billion processes a second, broken down between the synapses and the connections that happen to your brain and the number of times it happens. Your brain is absolutely a fantastic thing. It's an amazing organ. It pretty much is what we are. And just to give you some ideas about your brain, do you know what the cerebral cortex is? The cerebral cortex is pretty much the core of your brain. You know that the more that you use it, the more that you learn basically, the thicker it gets. It actually grows. Bilingual students have 30%, that are young, have 30% denser gray matter than people who are not bilingual. And the gray matter is around the white matter. The white matter is the inside of the gray matter is the outside of your brain. It's just very twisted, kind of looks like an intestine, and it's responsible for what you know, how smart you are, those type of things. They've done massive studies on this, and everything that I read where they did these studies was done with thousands, and sometimes, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of people. It was not like 200 or 300 people. 50 to 70% of people that go to doctor visits because they feel bad, they say most often, not most often, but 50% to 70% of the time, it's because of a mental issue rather than a physical issue. I'm sick, I don't feel good, whatever the case may be. Which is interesting. And then here's another thing. Everybody dreams. Did you know that? Everybody dreams. You can't dream when you're snoring. You don't dream when you're snoring. Most people don't remember. If you wake up in the middle of your dream, you're more likely to remember it than you are if you dream through the night. But did you know that while you're asleep dreaming, your brain uses more brain processes, it uses more brain's function than it does when you're awake? There you are. You're sleeping, you're dreaming, your brain is using more functions then than it is when you're up around doing whatever. And it's not just no, I mean it's ever. In other words, you're never outdoing yourself awake. You can't do enough when you're awake to match the brain process it does when you're asleep dreaming. They say that you don't ever dream anything that you haven't already seen. You're just simply categorizing and putting things together that mean something to you. But if you dream a monster, it's a coagulation of things that you already know. Does that make sense? Your brain is the fattest organ in your body. It relies the most on fat. It also relies the most on oxygen sugar. It uses up 20% of your body's energy. It actually produces completely measurable and tappable. You've seen The Matrix? Yeah. That's a real thing. Your bodies produce real amounts of energy. Babe Ruth, they tested him, which is kind of funny. He tested extremely high for the efficiency of his brain. His brain ran about 90% efficient, while most people run about 60. And the old adage that you use 10% of your brain is not true. It's actually, you use almost every part of your brain is in use some way. Now, we all believe that we use an infinitesimally small amount of what our brain's capabilities are. And I'll tell you about some of those capabilities. I have a friend who got interested. He simply wanted to learn, and he wanted to learn about meditation. And I have seen this man stick a needle in his arm and make himself bleed. And he can concentrate and make himself bleed on whichever side that he chooses. I've seen it with my own eyes. I have another friend of mine that used to be able to stick a thermometer in his mouth and give himself a fever. He learned how to do it. He read about how to meditate. The coolest thing, one of the coolest things I've ever seen about the mind and the brain is the monks in Tibet and there's only some of them that can do this, that sit outside at 20 below. Let me explain to you what that's like. Okay, at 20 below in 5 minutes, if you are clothed like you are now, you're in trouble. You have frostbite fingers, toes, that sort of thing. You're going to live, but it's very extremely cold. These guys sit outside in a circle and they meditate. And not only do they meditate, and I've seen this on TV, not only do they meditate long enough and hard enough that they keep themselves warm, they melt a circle of snow around them. They melt the circle of snow. At 20 below, if you sit in the snow underneath you doesn't melt, let alone the snow around you. Okay? So what they're doing is they're capturing and they've harnessed the ability to meditate and manifesting in a very, very physical nature. It's phenomenal.
Was it yellow snow?
It was not yellow snow, no. It was not yellow snow. To switch gears again on you. How many kids? You have kids? You don't have kids. Do you have kids? You have kids? You have kids? Yours are older, right? So, for those who have kids or who have ever watched kids, and you were talking to somebody earlier today about, do you want me to watch your kids? So would you ever take your kids to daycare or let someone watch them and they said, or let me ask you that another way. When you take somebody to a daycare or you let your kids go to watch somebody's house, what's one of the things that you're concerned with that they're going to be there for a certain amount of time? Either you tell them kind of how it is or you make sure that you understand how it is. One of those things is, what are they going to eat? My kid does not eat macaroni and cheese, or please don't whack my child out on sugar, I don't want to have to take home a spaz, or he has something serious like diabetes, or he just ate, he's going to be here for 3 hours, he's going to ask for food all day long, don't worry about it, okay, right? And most of us would probably, if we had kids, we would never ever let our kids stay someplace where the person told us, yes, your kid can stay here, and we have a very structured environment, he'll be safe and sound, and what we're going to do is we're going to take bags of sugar soaked in honey and put a little bit, I don't know, some broken razor blades in there and feed it to them. You would never do that, okay? You would never take your, you said, well, maybe, no. You would never take your child to go eat someplace where you knew that the only thing they ate all day was fast food. Nobody here would say, I want my child to go to a daycare if they're going to eat McDonald's every single day. I don't think that would happen. Okay. Conversely, if you had a place that you went to that you liked that was daycare and that was affordable to you, but they had a menu that was broke down into, we eat we don't charbroil our chicken because we've heard that that's bad. We eat non-fatty foods. We have lots of vegetables. We have charts and diagrams. They've scientifically figured out the best thing for a baby to eat, and they'll tailor-make your food. That would be a place that you would definitely want to be a part of or have your child go to, simply because you have ultimate control over what your child eats, right? Mm-hmm. Okay. The question is why? Why are you concerned about that so much, about what your child eats as long as it gets food? The answer to that question is obvious. It's my child. I care about him. He's growing up. It's going to drastically affect the way that he grows. It might drastically affect the way he feels right then and there, that day. Okay? As your child gets older, you still have an influence in them if you allow them to make some of your choices, but most of those choices you've made over the last 3 or 5 years, or 5 or 6 years, because you fed them accordingly along the way. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Well, an interesting thing about your brain, this thing that processes at 20 million billion processes a second, that uses 20% of your energy in your body, is that it eats too. Except the difference between your brain and your body is that you have the ability to feed your body or to not feed your body. You can make a choice. You guys chose to go to lunch. I chose not to. Your brain doesn't work that way. You don't have the choice. Your brain eats all day, every single day, whether you know it or not. I walked down the sidewalk, and just down the sidewalk, literally from here to the bar at the end of the corner, there was about 37 pieces of advertising, and 12 of them were on t-shirts. 12 of them. My brain processes that information. I don't have a choice as to whether or not, unless I am going to turn my senses off, which I don't know how to get through the world without it. But you're just bombarded by it. There are actually people, advocacies right now, who are advocating for things like blank space or quiet time, or not quiet time, but quiet spaces, where they're tired of advertising being everywhere. If you found a new space for an advertising company to make their joyful noise, if you found a new space that they haven't thought about and you think I'm crazy, when was the last time you've been in a men's bathroom in a nicer restaurant? Now they've got that screen, LED screen right there while I'm taking a lead telling me, hey, if you're drunk, try this, try our steaks, go here, call this cab company. You see what I'm saying? It's everywhere. You don't have choice as to whether or not your brain eats, but you have a choice as to whether or not what your brain eats. Now, you may not have a choice of all of the information that comes in, but just like your child when he gets older, who's making his own decision, who might be at school eating soda pop and that sort of thing, you definitely have the choice as to whether or not what you put into your brain, okay? And we talked about, yet the other day, we talked about character. And we boiled the character down to that. And when you think about it, character is not here. I can't tell your character by standing in front of you looking at you. I don't know. I know how tall you are, what you look like, and whether or not you take a punch, maybe. Okay? I know whether or not if we hang out in a bowling alley, I know we can go bowling and what your talent or skill level is. Okay? I know whether or not I want you on my volleyball team based on some things. Okay? I might know how intelligent you are. I might know a little bit about you, but I don't know anything about your character. And the interesting thing is because that's in your, and it's not in your brain, it's in your mind. And the difference between your brain and your mind is that your brain is something physical that you can touch. If you've ever seen your own brain, you're not going to live through it. Okay? Your mind, though, is not something you can physically touch. But your mind is affected by the things that go into the physical thing. Your mind is an echo of your brain. It's kind of like your dreams. You sleep at night and you dream about these things. It processes, it puts together in some sort of semblance what's happened throughout the day or leading up to that time of sleep. Your mind is exactly the same thing. It's an echo of what you put into it. And so we talked a little bit about character, and we talked about how character is important, and as important not only for as an individual, obviously, but as a company. Well, the question is, how do you change that, or how do you develop that, or how do you make that grow? And we talked about doing very small things, making a huge bit of difference. And it starts with where that is entirely is what you put into your brain, what you choose to put into your brain, or what you choose not to put in your brain. We're all probably very good at keeping little children away from watching inappropriate things. But as we get older, we don't get very good at not doing that, or we don't get very good at putting things in our minds that are quality things. When was the last time, and this is something that there's a study that I can't remember from when I was in the car business, I'll let that one down, about the percentage of people that spend any amount of time getting better at the thing they do most often, which is their job. How was the last time you learned something about what it is that you do that you didn't already know? There's a massive amount of information. Those people who do that very well are kind of like Jody. They just show up one day and they have a business. And we think, oh, we started in gym. I should start next gym. It's 8 years or 10 years or 38, however old he is, of putting information together. Saying, hey, I'm 27, whatever it is, 19. How old do you want to be today? No, I'm kidding. So and that affects things. When we think about, oh, well, what I think about is what I am, or I can be whatever I want, I will make up my mind to be. You can't. You're not going to be a gorilla tomorrow. I don't care how much you want to be a gorilla tomorrow. Okay? But you can be very, very good at something that's inside of your grasp. And you can change that thing that we talked about was so small as changing your character or building your character. That's very important. We talked about, I told you, we're going to talk about how to do that. It starts with feeding yourself something that you can actually eat and process. Whatever that is, and understanding its source, just like a vitamin or an aspirin or something like that. If I give you a pill and said, hey, this is a great pill, they make you feel better, you're going to be like, where'd that come from? What's that do for me? Oh, it's this and this and that. Don't want to talk about that. Let's talk about something else. You see what I'm saying? So, here's another interesting fact about brain and organs. Your skin weighs 3 times as much as your brain. And almost does. It does very little for you in the grand scheme of things. But we as a society of people, we spend a massive amount of time on our skin. Massive. We tan it, we stretch it, we put plastic pieces in it, we lotion it, we get a little piece of it that doesn't look right, little tag here, we shave it, we do all of these things to our skin. We do them every day. And we have massive amounts of things that tell us why your skin's not as good as his, and why my skin needs to have, you know, a Timtag taken off of, etc., etc., etc. Imagine spending that much time in your brain, and then having that echo into your mind, and having that be something. And if you don't think that that's possible, if you guys know what Stockholm Syndrome is, it's where somebody gets captured. Stockholm Syndrome is when you become a captive of a person. They kidnap you. And you spend so much time with that person that the kidnappee falls in love with the kidnapper. It's your brain, it's your brain and it's your mind dealing with it's a situation of recreating its entire reality, if you will. Okay, I'm not suggesting that any of us go get kidnapped or kidnap anyone today. I'll get him out of my trunk as soon as we're going. What I am suggesting, though, is that whatever it is, and I think this is where lots of time, for me, or particularly, where there's a disconnect into, that sounds great, but that doesn't add up because I don't really know what to do or how to do that. You lose interest in it. Well, what if you had an idea? Or what if you had something that you were passionate about? Or what if you had something that really got your juices going or motivated you? What if you had a joyful noise that you wanted to make, and you spent your time on whatever that is? Because I don't believe you can get, if you're doing something infinitesimally small that's very powerful, it's impossible to have that not affect you. So what if you are an artist, and all these other things that you do to survive, and you do to excel, and you do to become better, and to give yourself opportunity. But there's that other thing that's the real you, that's really passionate. That's this thing that's it might not be as grand as a purpose, but it's not much off. What if you spent some time on that? Because if you become better at that and you become immersed in that, then you start to, for lack of better words, you start to grow or you start to evolve, and it affects other things. I was involved in an elementary school that is unlike any place on planet Earth. No place will probably be like this again. We did not have a gymnasium. We had a cross-country skiing program. We had an astronomically phenomenal school. And it worked so well because I could have a bad day at school, but I gave myself a great day on the ski trails, or I could have a bad day skiing and have a good day at school. The man who put this together understood that. And what he understood is that there's your life and your work that you go through. There's also that other thing, that passion or that excitement or whatever you bring your joy to. I say, figure out what that is, and feed your brain. It'll affect other things. It'll affect the possible. And that is all I know about shrimp business.
All right. Well done.
What's that ringing noise?
It's leads.
That's what it's called.